This week on Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News, we're spotlighting a few of Colorado's black firsts in honor of Black History Month.
We've had to confront over 500 years of being treated as less than human.
Because I was a black woman, I guess they just assumed I wasn't a reporter.
From the first black columnist at the Denver Post to Denver's first black first lady.
I was regarded as a person who wouldn't do well because I was black.
A tribute to the trailblazers who broke barriers and paved the way for generations to come. Welcome to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Each week, in a partnership between Denver7 and CPR, we have a real talk about issues impacting underrepresented people across Colorado and amplifying voices you may not always hear.
Today, we're talking to three trailblazers in the Denver Black community about the ongoing importance of recognizing Black history.
To really understand the significance of these milestones, we first need to understand Denver's Black history, and few know it better than Colorado historian Terry Gentry, who joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Terry.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
So, Terry, you have a few firsts in your own family history. Can you talk about that and also paint a picture of what it was like for Black Coloradans, especially early Black Coloradans?
I come from amazing ancestors and live in an amazing community. My great-grandfather on my dad's side, Dr. Thomas Ernest McLean, is the first licensed black dentist in Colorado. And Dr. McLean went to Meharry Medical College in Nashville with his best friend, Dr. Joseph H.P. Westbrook. Dr. Westbrook came out to Colorado in early 1906, and my great-grandfather the latter part of 1906. My great-grandfather started his dental practice February 1907, went back and married my great-grandmother on June 26th and brought her back to Denver. And they had twin daughters, Ernestine and Josephine McLean, who later became professional dancers and danced on the RKO and Pantages circuit and traveled around the country. And they had Josephine and Ernestine McLean went on to continue their dance, and then Josephine passed away in 1938. Ernestine Smith and George W. Smith, who was a World War II veteran and worked on Union Pacific Railroad, have two children, Charles Thomas Smith and Charlene Marie Smith. And my dad became a division chief of the Denver Police Department. That's how he retired. And my aunt Charlene was a psychologist for Kaiser. So I have incredible roots on that side. And on my mom's side, my great-great-grandparents, Frank and Anna McPherson, moved from Nashville to Denver in 1903. And my great-great-grandfather was on the first board of trustees for Scots United Methodist Church. And then they bought land up in Deerfield in the 19-teens. So they had property up there for a while.
You know this history like the back of your hand, like so many people do, and the fact that there is so much iconic Black history within your own family. We talked about Deerfield, right? You talked about the Union Pacific Railroad. You talked about coming to Denver in the early 1900s. What has it been like preserving that history, remembering that? You're rattling this off the top of your head, right? But there are stories underneath that I bet you could talk for hours about.
Well, be careful, because I can keep you here
You're like,
for hours.
I can.
I can do that. But also, I like to talk about this community that my family grew up in. They were in the Whittier, Five Points area of Denver, and you look at all of the people that were part of that community. We also look at the Cherry Creek neighborhood and the members of that community and how all of these people came together and enriched our lives and lifted us up. Generationally, we come from amazing folks, and I could rattle off 2,000 or 3,000 names for you of people that have made such an impact on my life, our community's lives. There's just so much rich history to explore and experience.
Why do these stories matter, especially these first stories, if you will? You talked about your great-grandfather, the first Black licensed dentist in Colorado, and so many barrier-breaking people. But why do they matter? Why do their stories matter?
We've had to confront over 500 years of horrific experiences in the United States with being treated as less than human, people and communities destroyed and decimated in North, Central, and South America. And you want to look at the individuals that were part of those histories and see the humanity of us, see the beauty of our people, the richness, the diversity, the brilliance of people, and show that we are more than we've ever been defined. And we need to preserve this history and teach our children so they know where they come from.
Yeah. Can you talk about, I guess, the spoken history of it, sitting down with your kids and your grandkids and saying, this, rolling pin was my grandmother's, or this is the street that I remember, my great-grandfather walked down, 30, 50, 60 years ago, and how important that is, besides saying, let's go to the museum in 5 Points and check it out there. Does that make sense?
I think about my grandmothers who talked a lot about our family histories. My dad's mom she worked for the Department of Parks and Recreation here in City and County of Denver, volunteered from 1946 to 48, and then worked from 1948 to 1984. And she taught dance, different ethnic dances, to people in our community. All of the stories that my grandmother taught me about our family, and then the things that she taught me through the dance expressions, have carried with me the rest of my life. When I went back to school for Africana Studies and I'm sitting in class in the introductory class and the teacher's asking questions and I could raise my hand and answer most of the questions that he asked because my grandmother was teaching us so much about these different cultures while she's teaching us how to move and dance and all of these cultural things. So there's so much more about than just third-party information or just sitting there looking at things. You take it in and it becomes part of who you are and helps you celebrate and honor the best of yourself.
Absolutely. For our viewers and listeners, Terry has also done extensive work with the Black American West Museum and preserving so many of the histories there, the home itself. Justina Ford, the first Black female licensed doctor in Colorado. Terry has worked on preserving her legacy and story. We could talk to Terry all day, but we have a lot more to get to on this episode of Real Talk. So for now, Terry Gentry, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you so much.
Well, up next, we talk with Wilma Webb, not only a First Lady, but a fierce advocate for civil rights and a trailblazer herself.
This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. This week on Real Talk, we are highlighting some of Denver's very own Black firsts in Colorado history.
Yeah, we just heard a brief overview of some Black history in Colorado from a local Denver historian. Now we'll talk with Denver's first Black First Lady, Mrs. Wilma Webb, a distinguished Colorado state representative who served 6 terms in the House of Representatives, was responsible for introducing and passing of bills to establish Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the state. Representative Webb, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to join you, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
You have done so much for Denver, for the state of Colorado, for so many communities. It's going to be impossible to highlight all of them, but one thing I really want to talk about is some legislation that you were so instrumental in helping pass, and it dealt with long-term home health care for senior citizens and drug treatment care for assistance to substance abusers. What compelled you to take on this kind of work?
It's very difficult to try to help all aspects of the poor, of people who don't have access to health care, and also to see a trend of something happening that really does need health attention. And what I saw in terms of the drug treatment bill that I eventually got passed, it took me 3 years to do it, was that there was a need there because at that time our communities, our city, and our nation were reinfected by drug abuse, by substance abuse, and particularly there were no avenues for treatment. It was really mostly regarded as doing crime rather than having a health problem. And so I had to educate all of the legislators there And I had the assistance of the Denver Police Department in terms of coming down and showing the different kinds of drugs that were available illegally and the damage and the harm that they were doing to families, to the individuals who were afflicted, and also to our city and nation. And so finally, after my third attempt, many of them saw the light that it just wasn't a criminal problem, that it was a health problem.
How did your identity as a black leader shape your time in office as this legislation was moving through and as you were working within the community to lift up those problems and find solutions?
I found that I was regarded as a person who wouldn't do well because I was black, but I always regarded myself, quote, as a leader, that people had put me there to do good for people. And so I went ahead and did what I thought was needed for the community, for the city, for the state. And I think perseverance is what got me through it. But there were a lot of trials and a lot of tribulations. I can't say it was easy. But anyway, just moving forward with what I thought was right to do.
And what were some of those trials and tribulations, those significant challenges that you faced? We know you're battling so many stereotypes.
Well, as an example, there was an attempt to discredit me. I was serving on the highest committee of the Colorado legislature, the Joint Budget Committee, and it was quite an honor to serve there. And I had been both elected and appointed to that position. But before that year became apparent, I was also carrying legislation that was not particularly agreed with in terms of the majority of both parties that were serving there. And the majority party, the entire time that I served, which was 13 years, was the Republican Party. And I had carried the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. legislation, and I was carrying enterprise zones to help develop businesses in minority communities. And I was helping the Women's Commission, and I was doing all of these things that particulars in the legislature didn't like my emphasis, because I was being effective as a communicator to not only Democratic leaders but also to Republican leaders. And so one day I was sitting on the House floor and we were getting ready to go into committee hearings. And I was handed a note that someone wanted to see me out in the lobby area. And I just was sort of not in the right frame of mind, nor did I have the time to meet with someone on the way to committee. So I went out a different door. And so then the next time that the House came together, I heard my name being called on the microphone. I was being summoned to come to the microphone. And what had happened was I was being accused of something that was unethical, and that was vote trading. And I never even knew what vote trading was and never did it, not at all, ever in my life. The person that wanted to see me, from which the note came from, was someone that I had served with the term before. And so then I was putting two and two together in my mind about what was going on here. And so there was the accusation, didn't I meet with someone in the hall, and didn't you discuss X, Y, and Z? And I said, no such meeting took place. And then I said, A2, Brutai. In other words, that was a friend, or someone who I thought was a friend, who was involved in something that was destructive and not true. These were some of the underground kinds of things that people didn't know were going on. And as it were, I carried the Dr. King bill, as most people know, for 4 years, but it was a 10-year effort to get it adopted in Colorado.
Before we go, Wilma, what advice would you give to those just feeling really discouraged in this political climate?
I think that it's a sad time and a dangerous time for our nation and for the world, and we have to be aware. And we have to be motivated to do what we still believe to be righteous, but what we know will help people and will make America better and will make the world better. And sometimes we have to reorganize ourselves and we have to re-strategize. But we also always have to be righteous in what we're doing. And what we're seeing now happen to our country and to many different cities and states and children and women and people across the world is not making the world better. It's making it worse. And so we have to know that we got us. And there's so many people that know that this isn't right, that we must come together and strategize to make the decisions that are in behalf of Americans in terms of being better and in behalf of the world being a better place for everybody.
Right. The Honorable Wilma Webb, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, breaking barriers in Colorado media.
We'll be speaking with the first Black columnist at the Denver Post. You won't want to miss this. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Joining us now is Sandra Dillard, the first Black columnist at the Denver Post. Sandra, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Let me first off say it is an honor to meet you. The history that you have at the Denver Post is iconic. 3 decades in a variety of roles. Tell us a little bit about this other distinction. In 1975, you were among 44 people who gathered in Washington, D.C. and founded the National Association of Black Journalists, which is a huge organization today. So, A, thank you for that. And B, talk a little bit about those decades at the Denver Post and in these roles that are seen clearly as iconic.
I had 29 years of fun and learning. If you work for a newspaper, it's like going back to college. You know, you just learn, you get to go everywhere, meet everybody, and tell everybody everything. I've always been that kind of person, just been nosy, I guess.
Yeah. Always asking that question. Hey, what are you doing over there, right? Yeah.
I just want to say, as a member of NABJ myself and current president of CABJ, I'm so thankful for you. I know I've told this to you before, but I truly feel like you paved the way for myself and journalists like myself. And I know that it couldn't be easy. What was it like as a Black female journalist walking into that newsroom at the Post back in the 70s?
People would just sort of stop. They would sort of stop and look. But I didn't mind, Hey, I'm here now and I'm happy. Someone told me I was acting too happy. And I was happy. I was glad. I'd always wanted to be a journalist. I wrote my first story about our campfire group when I was 9 for a little neighborhood paper, and I'm sure everybody was just dying to know what the campfire girls were doing. But and I worked on my junior high paper and my high school paper and my college paper, and I freelanced. But I never thought I would ever be a working journalist, because when I came out of college, the only 4 things Black women with educations could be: teacher, nurse, social worker, librarian. And I had never even met a Black journalist. So I didn't have any role models or anything like that. What really got me interested was when I was in junior high. I represented Colorado and Wyoming in the National Spelling Bee. Nobody Black has ever done that to this date. And I won't tell you how long ago it was, but junior high. And one of the things that they did in Washington is they gave us welcome badges. And they were supposed to, let you go into places. One night, my chaperone decided she was going, she and her friend were going out, and they dropped us off at the movies, except I couldn't go in. And they told me that. He said, "We don't allow in here." But later on in the week, when my chaperone wrote the story about what I did, she focused on the fact that I had discovered how many steps they had in the Washington Monument. Now, see, a true journalist would have written about how this young girl is there representing 2 states, had spelled down all the white kids in both the states. We couldn't go to the movies. But she didn't write that. She wrote, I discovered how many steps.
Wow. I know that had to be extremely painful, but it clearly drove you forward to say, you won't write it, I will. You also covered, eventually, theater and
Yes.
became a columnist. There's an iconic photo of you at the Post in your early days, and there's a sign on your desk that says, I am not the receptionist. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah. I had moved and I was sitting near the elevator along with all the other reporters. But because I was a black woman, I guess they just assumed I wasn't a reporter. So they always came up to me to ask me, where's the bathroom and where's this? And I'm on deadline just like everybody else. So I just put up a sign, I'm...
I love that, and I brought it up for a reason because it just speaks to so much of who I've come to know you to be. Just a no holds bar. Look, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. I have a job to do. Move out the way. And I just absolutely love that about you, Sandra. There are a lot of Black journalists who are struggling right now. Lots of journalists of color, journalists in general, who are struggling right now just to the changes in our industry. What advice would you give to young journalists today who are starting to hit that wall that I think all journalists hit in their career, where they say, do I really want to keep doing this forever?
Do you like getting up every day and going? That's, I loved my job. There was problems at the Post, like any place else. And there were things I didn't like. I think the worst thing that happened to me is I covered a meeting one night. I think I'd been at the Post a couple of years. And it was a meeting of police cadets. They were getting ready to graduate and be policemen. And one of them said, the first thing I'm going to do is kill Lauren Watson. This is a cop, to be, admitting that he's planning murder. I could believe that the Post would not print that story. They would not print it. The guy who was running the program called up, oh, you're going to ruin what's his name's life. I still know his name, but I just won't say it. You're going to ruin his life. He did mean it. Of course he meant it. And I could not get the Post to print it. And I had a witness, a photographer was with me. I had him get the guy's picture, and he ran the picture the next day on the front page, and it just said, he was a member of the class that was graduating. And I think that was the hardest thing that ever really happened to me at the Post.
And just to give context, Sandra's brother, Lauren Watson, was a Black Panther.
He was head of the Black Panthers.
Head of the Black Panther. So in the 1970s, this was a very seen as a controversial thing and a contentious thing. So when this cadet is saying this, there's a history behind the relationship between the Black Panthers and the police. Well, Sandra Dillard, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Good. And that's this week's episode of Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Every week, we have a real talk on issues that impact Coloradans who are often overlooked.
You can find all of our shows at denver7.com/realtalk or at cpr.org/realtalk. Have a great day.